Hello and welcome to what will be the last Flip Preaching video in this series. As we move into August and into the summer, I will be away, I'm sure others will be away, and we're going to be focusing on what church is going to look like when we get to open back up in the September time. So this is the last Flip Preaching video on direction, but that doesn't mean we're going to stop looking at direction. There's going to be some material coming out just to help us over that August period, practice our discernment, practice listening to God, as we continue to seek where He is calling us to. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 9 today, verses 10 to 17. A very famous story. You will know this one off by heart. It is the feeding of the 5,000. But even if you think you know the story, it's worth having a look, reading it again, because there's probably bits in here you'll notice or not notice. We actually looked at this story in our Zoom group earlier this week, and people were surprised. Things like, the little boy wasn't there, which is a character, the one that has the loaves and the fishes we find in the other Gospels, but not always in each of the stories. And so there might be things that catch you out in this story. And what you get at the beginning of this is a little bit of a feedback from when Jesus has sent out the 12 apostles and they come back in. And then we have the feeding of the 5,000 off the back of their interaction. So it's important to read this story as a whole. Now, when we looked at this on Tuesday, we did something that comes from the Ignatian spirituality or spiritual exercises. And it was a way of listening to the story multiple times and asking questions of it and allowing Jesus to speak to us through this story in our position. And as we went through it, one of the things that struck me, particularly listening to other people as they shared what they felt God had said to them or what had struck them, that actually this is a story about discernment. It's a story of the disciples, and we've got some of those hallmarks that we've seen in other times. The disciples recognize that there is an issue. They come to Jesus and they say, look, Jesus, we need to send all of these people away because they need to get food and they need to have shelter. And we've talked about in other instances where the problem is marked out. So in Acts, when they recognize that the widows aren't all being fed, the disciples say, we need some people that will do this job for us. At the very beginning of Acts, when they recognize the need for another apostle to be brought in to replace Judas, they recognize the issue. And that's what they do here in Luke. They say to Jesus, Jesus, this is the problem that's at hand. There's all of these people, they all want food, and we're not able to give it to them because we just don't have enough. And when they come with this problem, they're probably looking for Jesus just to solve it for them, to just say, right, there you go, it's done. But what he does is he says to them, well, you go and give them something to eat. I wonder how many times when we have an issue, something that we're wrestling with, struggling with, we bring it to God and we expect him just to answer it, just with a word or a miraculous intervention, just solve something. But that's not always how discernment works. Sometimes actually that which comes back to us is a question for us or an action for us to do that we probably weren't expecting. And Jesus says to these disciples, well, there's the problem, you go and solve it. Now, they look at the crowd and say, look, Jesus, there is thousands of people here. There's no way that we're going to be doing this, and all we've got is 5 loaves and 2 fishes. This just is not going to work. So they respond to Jesus' challenge with a very honest assessment. Actually, we just can't do this. It's beyond us to be able to feed all of these people. And so then Jesus takes the bread and the fish and he breaks them, and he gets the disciples to put everyone in groups of 50. And then they begin to distribute the food, and then we're told that there's lots left over. And what struck me about this is that we have the problem, we have them seeking Jesus and seeking the answer. Jesus throws it back into their court, and they're kind of caught off guard probably. And yet then as they kind of begin to work through the issues, we know that this is what needs to happen, but we just don't have the resources to do it, God. We don't have enough food, and there's too many people, and we're not quite sure. And then Jesus just says, well, give me the bits that you've got and then do these next steps. And he gets them to split them into groups of 50. And sometimes, this is how discernment goes. We come with an issue and we bring it to God, and the answer that we get back isn't always the one we wanted to hear. Jesus puts it back in our court and gets us to think a little bit more about what are the issues around this, what are the problems that we're facing, what do we actually need? And then when he's done that, and the disciples return again and say, but this is where we're at, Jesus then begins to give them the next steps in order to perform this miracle. And so it struck me that this is one of those stories of discernment happening in just a few moments as the disciples and Jesus are talking together. But it might shed some light on what it is like when we are seeking to discern something. So maybe over the next week until we gather on Thursday night, you want to just reflect some more on these verses, read through them, ask yourself questions like, what is Jesus saying to me in this moment? And hopefully God will speak to you as he spoke to those of us in the Zoom group, as he is opening up his word for each and every one of us. So I hope you've got something out of this video. I hope that you get something out of these verses. I will see those that come and join us on Thursday night as we continue to explore the meaning of what it is to discern God's will as we seek his direction. Take care. Goodbye.